The distant howl of a wolf echoed across the moonlit plains as Nathaniel Drake huddled beneath a canvas tent, shielding her baby boy from the relentless Nevada wind. Blood stained her torn dress, not her own, but that of her husband, whose body now lay buried beneath a shallow mound of rocky soil 2 miles back. The bandits had come at dawn, 5 men with faces like carved stone and eyes that held no mercy. They'd taken everything but her life, her child, and a gold locket containing a faded photograph of her parents. The year was 1875, and Silver Peak was still 3 days' ride north. Nathaniel had heard whispers of the mining town's prosperity, tales of silver veins running thick through the mountains and honest folk building a life away from the chaos of larger settlements. What remained of her hopes now rested on reaching that distant promise before hunger and exposure claimed what the bandits had not. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Nevada desert. Nathaniel cradled her 10-month-old son, Samuel, against her chest, his small hands clutching at her collar as she walked. Her boots, once fine leather, now split at the seams. The water in her canteen sloshed dangerously low. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, and Samuel's pitiful cries tore at her heart. "Just a little longer, my sweet boy," she whispered, pressing chapped lips to his forehead. "We'll find help soon." The distant thunder of hooves sent ice through her veins. Nathaniel frantically scanned the horizon, spotting a dust cloud approaching from the east. With nowhere to hide on the open plain, she clutched Samuel tighter and quickened her pace, though she knew outrunning riders was impossible. As the horses drew nearer, she could make out 3 riders. Her heart sank. They'd found her the remaining bandits who'd murdered Thomas. They'd come to finish what they'd started. "Please," she prayed aloud, "not my boy." The lead rider separated from the others, approaching at a gallop. Nathaniel turned her back to shield Samuel, prepared to beg for her child's life if not her own. The horse slowed, and she heard boots hit the ground behind her. "Madam," the voice was deep but lacked the cruel edge she expected. "Are you all right?" She turned slowly, finding herself face to face with a tall man whose weathered face bore the lines of sun and worry in equal measure. He wore a dust-covered duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over blue eyes. Behind him, 2 younger men remained mounted, rifles visible but not aimed. "I." Nathaniel's voice broke, days of terror and grief catching in her throat. "We need help." The man's gaze swept over her torn dress, her blistered skin, and the infant whimpering against her. Something in his expression shifted from concern to a determined calm. "I'm Jackson Bentley," he said, reaching slowly for his canteen. "This here's my land you're crossing. Whatever trouble you're in, you're safe now." Nathaniel's knees buckled, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Jackson moved with surprising quickness, catching her before she hit the ground. Samuel wailed as she clutched him desperately, afraid to let go even as darkness edged her vision. "My baby," she whispered. "I've got you both," Jackson assured her, his voice the last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away. When Nathaniel awoke, she was lying on a bed softer than anything she'd felt in weeks. Samuel slept peacefully beside her, his face clean and pink. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating a modest but tidy bedroom. For one disorienting moment, she thought perhaps the attack had been a nightmare, that Thomas might walk through the door at any moment with his gentle smile. The creak of floorboards brought her fully alert. Nathaniel sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs as Jackson Bentley appeared in the doorway. He carried a tray with a steaming bowl and cup. "You've been asleep nearly 18 hours, he said, setting the tray on a small table. "Your boy's been fed and changed. Mrs. Wilkins from the neighboring ranch came by to help with that." Nathaniel reached instinctively for Samuel, checking him over despite his peaceful slumber. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse, "for helping us." Jackson nodded, pouring water from a pitcher. "You want to tell me what had you walking alone across open country with an infant?" The memories came flooding back: Thomas's laughter at breakfast, the approaching riders, the gunshots, her desperate flight with Samuel clutched to her chest. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Bandits," she managed through a tight throat. "5 of them. They killed my husband, took our wagon, our supplies, everything." She looked up at Jackson, whose face had hardened. "They're still out there." Jackson's jaw tightened. "You're heading to Silver Peak," she nodded. "My husband's cousin owns a shop there. It's all we have left." "The marshal should hear about this," Jackson said. "These attacks have been increasing, fourth one this month." He handed her the water. "But that can wait until you're stronger. Drink this, then try the stew. It's not fancy, but it's filling." As she sipped the cool water, Nathaniel studied her rescuer more carefully. Jackson Bentley appeared to be in his late 30s, with sun-streaked brown hair and a closely trimmed beard shot with silver. His hands were calloused, his posture straight despite the weariness evident in his eyes. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, suddenly conscious of her position in what must be his home. A shadow crossed his face. "Just me and my son, Daniel. He's 12. Been just the two of us for 5 years now." He gestured to the stew. "Please eat, I'll leave you be." Before she could thank him again, he disappeared from the doorway. Nathaniel turned to the stew, simple beef and vegetables, but the most delicious thing she'd tasted in days. As she ate, she gazed around the room, noticing small touches of femininity: the lace curtains, a faded quilt with intricate stitching, a small porcelain figurine of a bird on the dresser. This had been someone's room once. Someone no longer present. After finishing her meal, Nathaniel found a wash basin and clean clothes, laid out a simple dress that hung loose on her frame but was clean and whole. She washed and changed, feeling human again for the first time since the attack. Samuel awakened as she finished, his blue eyes blinking up at her with innocent trust that broke her heart anew. "We're safe for now, little one," she whispered, lifting him into her arms. Venturing from the bedroom, Nathaniel found herself in a well-built ranch house. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large hearth, sturdy table, and 2 comfortable chairs. Through windows, she could see a barn, corrals, and open rangeland stretching to distant mountains. Jackson sat at the table with a boy who could only be Daniel, lanky, with his father's blue eyes and a serious expression beyond his years. Both looked up as she entered. "Madam," Daniel said, standing politely as his father had taught him. "This is Mrs. Drake," Jackson introduced her. "And her son Samuel. They'll be staying with us until they're well enough to continue to Silver Peak." "It's Miss Drake now, I suppose," Nathaniel corrected quietly. "But please call me Nathaniel." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "That's a boy's name." Despite everything, Nathaniel found herself smiling. "My father wanted a son to carry on his name. When he got me instead, he used it anyway." "It's a strong name," Jackson said. "Daniel, finish your breakfast. You've got chores waiting." As Daniel hurriedly ate his remaining food, Jackson explained their situation. His ranch, the Double B, spanned 5,000 acres of prime grazing land. 20 men worked for him, most living in a bunkhouse near the main house, others at line camps across the property. Silver Peak lay 30 miles north, a 2-day ride in good weather. "Marshal Evans should hear about these bandits," Jackson said. "I can take you to town in a few days once you're stronger." "I don't want to impose," Nathaniel began, but Jackson cut her off with a shake of his head. "You're not imposing. These are dangerous times. No one should be traveling alone, especially not with a child." Daniel finished his breakfast and stood. "Pa, can I take Thunderbolt to check the south fence today? Tim said he saw some breaks yesterday." Jackson regarded his son thoughtfully. "Take Hank with you and be back by sundown." As Daniel left, eagerness in his step despite the serious task, Nathaniel saw both pride and worry in Jackson's eyes. "He seems very responsible," she offered. "He's had to be," Jackson replied. "His mother died when he was 7. Fever took her before the doctor could even reach us." He cleared his throat. "Daniel's been my right hand ever since." "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said, understanding now the absence she'd felt in the house. "Life out here doesn't leave much room for softness," Jackson said, rising from the table. "But I don't mean to burden you with that. You've got enough weighing on you." Over the next 3 days, Nathaniel regained her strength. The horror of Thomas's death remained a raw wound, but the immediate terror receded. Samuel thrived under the attentive care of both Nathaniel and the ranch women who visited. bringing clothes that their own children had outgrown and advice freely given. Jackson Bentley proved an unexpectedly gentle host. Beneath his weathered exterior lay a man of quiet intelligence and unwavering principles. He spent his days working the ranch, but made time each evening to sit with Nathaniel on the porch, watching the sunset while Daniel played with Samuel, the baby's giggles a balm to the grief that still haunted her. On the fourth morning, Jackson announced they would ride to Silver Peak the following day. "I've business in town," he explained over coffee, "and you should speak with the marshal about the attack." Nathaniel nodded, a complicated emotion rising in her chest. Relief at moving forward with her plans mixed with an unexpected reluctance to leave the safety of the Double B. "I can never repay your kindness," she said. Jackson's expression remained unreadable. "There's nothing to repay. Out here we look after each other. It's the only way to survive." The journey to Silver Peak began at dawn. Jackson drove a wagon with Nathaniel and Samuel, while Daniel rode alongside on his prized horse, Thunderbolt. 2 ranch hands accompanied them as guards, rifles at the ready. As they traveled, the landscape gradually changed from flat rangeland to rolling hills dotted with pinyon pines and juniper. Jackson pointed out landmarks: an unusual rock formation, a creek that ran year-round, the distant peaks that gave the town its name. "Silver made this town," he explained. "But cattle will sustain it. The mines won't last forever." By mid-afternoon, they crested a hill, and Silver Peak spread before them, a bustling town of wooden buildings, dusty streets, and the constant activity of a settlement finding its identity. Church spires rose alongside saloon signs, while the imposing structures of the assay office and bank spoke of the town's growing prosperity. "It's bigger than I imagined," Nathaniel admitted, bouncing Samuel on her knee as he fussed with excitement at the new sights. "Doubled in size over the last 3 years," Jackson said. "Your husband's cousin, what did you say his name was?" "James Dixon. He owns a mercantile, according to Thomas's letters." Jackson nodded. "Dixon's General Store, I know it well. Good man, fair prices." They made their way down the main street, drawing curious glances from townspeople who recognized Jackson, but not his companions. He guided the wagon to a hitching post outside a solid brick building marked Marshal's Office. "Let's start here," he said, helping Nathaniel down from the wagon. "Daniel, stay with the wagon." The marshal's office was cool and dim after the bright sunshine. Marshal Robert Evans, a barrel-chested man with a silver mustache and shrewd eyes, listened intently as Nathaniel recounted the attack, his weathered face darkened with each detail she provided. "Can you describe the men?" he asked, pencil poised over a notebook. Nathaniel closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember faces she'd tried to forget. 5 men. The leader had a scar across his chin, black hat with a rattlesnake band. One was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Another wore a red bandana and had rotted front teeth. The marshal and Jackson exchanged glances. "Sounds like the Holloway gang," Evans said grimly. "They've been terrorizing travelers between here and Carson City for months. I'm sorry about your husband, madam, but this information helps. We've got posses from 3 counties looking for them." After providing all the details she could remember, Jackson suggested they find James Dixon. The mercantile stood near the town center, a large establishment with a covered porch and windows displaying everything from tools to fabrics. A bell jingled as they entered, and a round-faced man with thinning hair looked up from behind the counter. His expression shifted from polite interest to shock as he took in Nathaniel and the baby. "Nathaniel?" he asked uncertainly. "Thomas's wife, James," she confirmed, her voice catching. "Thomas is dead." James Dixon came around the counter quickly, genuine grief etching his features. "My God, what happened?" As Nathaniel explained, James's wife Mary appeared from the back room, immediately taking charge with practical efficiency that reminded Nathaniel of her late mother-in-law. "You'll stay with us, of course," Mary insisted, already reaching for Samuel, who went willingly to her experienced arms. "We have plenty of room upstairs." Nathaniel turned to Jackson, who had remained respectfully near the door. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, "for everything." Jackson shifted uncomfortably under the gratitude. "No need for thanks, I'm glad you found your family." He tipped his hat to James and Mary. "Dixon, Mrs. Dixon, I'll leave Mrs. Drake in your good care." "Mr. Bentley," James said warmly, "please join us for dinner tonight." "It's the least we can offer for your help." Jackson hesitated, then nodded once. "Daniel and I would be honored." 7 o'clock. As he left, Nathaniel felt an inexplicable sense of loss watching his broad shoulders disappear through the doorway. Mary, observant despite her focus on Samuel, caught the look on Nathaniel's face. "A good man, that Jackson Bentley," she commented. "Hasn't been the same since Catherine died, though. Keeps to himself mostly, except for ranch business." "He saved our lives," Nathaniel said simply. Mary nodded knowingly. "Come upstairs, dear. You need rest, and I want to hear everything about my cousin Thomas. Later, we'll talk about what comes next for you and this handsome young man." The Dixons' home above the Mercantile offered comfort Nathaniel had feared she might never know again. A hot bath, clean clothes that actually fit, and the security of walls that didn't sway with every breeze restored a sense of normalcy that brought both relief and guilt. How could she feel anything but grief so soon after Thomas's death? Dinner that evening proved a surprisingly pleasant affair. Jackson and Daniel arrived promptly at 7, both cleaned up and wearing their Sunday best. Daniel's usually windswept hair had been tamed with water, and Jackson had trimmed his beard. The transformation from rugged rancher to gentleman caller was subtle but unmistakable. James Dixon proved a generous host, sharing stories of Thomas's youth that brought both laughter and tears. Mary's cooking rivaled anything Nathaniel had tasted in the finest Denver restaurants she and Thomas had visited on their honeymoon. Throughout the meal, Nathaniel found herself watching Jackson. He spoke intelligently on matters of cattle prices, railroad expansion, and territorial politics. Daniel clearly adored his father, looking to him for approval with each comment or question he contributed to the adult conversation. "What will you do now, Nathaniel?" James asked as Mary served apple pie. "You're welcome to stay with us as long as you need." The question caught her off guard. In the chaos of survival, Nathaniel hadn't thought beyond reaching Silver Peak. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I have some education I taught school before marrying Thomas." "Perhaps there's need for a teacher here, actually," James said. "There is. The town council's been advertising for a school teacher for months. The last one left to get married in Sacramento." "The position comes with a small house behind the schoolhouse," Mary added. "Nothing fancy, but it would give you independence." Nathaniel felt a flicker of hope for the first time since the attack. "I would need to find someone to watch Samuel while I teach." "I could help with that," Mary offered. "At least until you get settled." Jackson, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "The town needs educated children. It would be a valuable service." His approval shouldn't have mattered, but somehow it did. Nathaniel found herself smiling at him across the table. "Then I'll inquire about the position tomorrow." As the evening concluded, Jackson and Daniel prepared to return to their hotel for the night before riding home in the morning. At the door, Jackson hesitated. "If you need anything supplies, help with repairs at the schoolhouse, send word to the Double B," he said. "Thank you," Nathaniel replied, suddenly aware of how different her life would have been if he hadn't found her on that dusty plain. "For everything." Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of shared experience perhaps, or recognition of the fragility of life on the frontier. Then he was gone, Daniel at his side, their figures disappearing into the darkening street. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity. The town council, eager to fill the teaching position, hired Nathaniel immediately upon reviewing her credentials. The schoolhouse needed cleaning and minor repairs, but the attached living quarters, while small, proved comfortable enough for her and Samuel. James and Mary helped furnish the simple home with donated pieces from townspeople, eager to welcome their new teacher. Nathaniel found herself overwhelmed by the generosity of strangers who brought dishes of food, handmade quilts, and toys for Samuel. By the time school was scheduled to begin, Nathaniel had 27 students enrolled, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. The work of preparing lessons and organizing the classroom offered blessed distraction from grief that still ambushed her at unexpected moments, when Samuel made a sound that reminded her of Thomas, or when she reached instinctively for a hand no longer there. She saw nothing of Jackson Bentley during those busy days, though she found herself watching the street whenever she ventured out, half expecting to see his tall figure among the townspeople. Daniel, however, appeared at the mercantile one afternoon, ostensibly to pick up supplies. "Pa said to ask if you need anything for the schoolhouse," he said, his serious demeanor belied by the hopeful look in his eyes. Nathaniel smiled at the boy. "Actually, I could use help moving some desks. Would you have time?" Daniel's face brightened. "Yes, madam." As they worked rearranging the schoolroom, Daniel spoke about the ranch, his horse, and his studies. Jackson insisted he keep up with his books even while working alongside the ranch hands. "Pa says education is what separates men from animals," Daniel explained, pushing a heavy desk into place. "He reads every night, even when he's tired." "Your father seems like a wise man," Nathaniel commented. Daniel nodded solemnly. "He misses having someone to talk to, though. He thinks I don't notice, but sometimes he just stares at Ma's picture and gets real quiet." The innocent observation struck Nathaniel deeply. In Jackson Bentley, she recognized her own struggle, the effort to move forward while honoring what was lost. "Will you be coming to school here?" she asked, changing the subject. "Pa says I can come 2 days a week when the work allows," Daniel replied. "I'm behind on my mathematics." "Well, we'll fix that," Nathaniel promised. When Daniel left, carrying a list of books the school needed, Nathaniel felt a curious lightening of her spirit. The connection to Jackson, however tenuous, offered comfort she hadn't expected to find. The school term began on a crisp September morning. Nathaniel stood at the door of the one-room schoolhouse, watching children arrive with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Parents nodded respectfully, curious about the young widow who would be teaching their children. Samuel remained with Mary, who had insisted on caring for him during school hours until Nathaniel could make more permanent arrangements. The separation twisted her heart, but the practical necessity of earning a living outweighed her desire to keep him constantly at her side. As the last students filtered in, Nathaniel spotted a familiar figure on horseback at the edge of the schoolyard. Jackson sat atop his bay gelding, Daniel beside him on Thunderbolt. He tipped his hat when he caught her eye but made no move to approach. After seeing Daniel safely delivered, he turned his horse and rode away, leaving Nathaniel with an inexplicable sense of disappointment. Teaching proved both more challenging and more rewarding than Nathaniel remembered. The diverse ages and abilities of her students required creative approaches to education, but their eagerness to learn, particularly among the older girls who had few other opportunities for advancement, inspired her to excel. Daniel Bentley attended faithfully every Tuesday and Thursday, arriving on Thunderbolt with a packed lunch and determined expression. Though initially quiet in class, he soon revealed himself to be exceptionally bright, particularly in history and literature. "Your son has a fine mind," Nathaniel told Jackson when he came to collect Daniel one Thursday afternoon. "He could go to university with proper preparation." Jackson's expression softened with pride. His mother would have wanted that. She had schooling back east before coming west. "And what do you want for him?" Nathaniel asked, noticing how the late autumn sunlight caught the silver strands in his beard. "I want him to have choices," Jackson said after a moment's consideration. "The ranch will always be there if he wants it, but I don't want it to be his only option." The thoughtfulness of his answer stayed with Nathaniel long after he'd ridden away with Daniel. So many fathers she'd known viewed their sons merely as extensions of themselves, future inheritors of their ambitions. Jackson's perspective spoke of a deeper understanding of parenthood. As winter settled over Silver Peak, the town prepared for Christmas festivities. The mercantile displayed imported toys and candies, the church organized a pageant, and homes throughout town adorned their windows with candles and evergreen boughs. For Nathaniel, the approach of the holiday brought renewed grief. Last Christmas, she and Thomas had celebrated with dreams of their child's first Christmas to come. Now Thomas lay in an unmarked grave, and Samuel would grow up with no memories of his father. Mary Dixon, perceptive to her melancholy, insisted Nathaniel join their family celebrations. "Bring Samuel and come to dinner Christmas Eve," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "James has invited some friends. It will do you good to be around people." When Christmas Eve arrived, Nathaniel dressed Samuel in his best clothes, a tiny suit Mary had altered from one of her own children's outgrown garments. She herself wore a green dress borrowed from Mary, her hair arranged more carefully than usual. The Dixons' home glowed with candlelight and good cheer. A small tree decorated with paper ornaments and strings of cranberries stood in the corner, while delicious aromas from the kitchen promised a feast to come. "Nathaniel," James greeted her warmly, come in, let me take your coat." As she handed over her wrap, Nathaniel became aware of another guest rising from an armchair by the fire. Jackson Bentley, dressed in a dark suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to distinguished gentleman, crossed the room toward her. "Miss Drake," he said, his deep voice somehow softer in the intimate setting. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Bentley," she replied, unexpectedly flustered by his presence. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Dad never misses Mrs. Dixon's Christmas dinner," Daniel piped up, appearing at his father's side. "Can I hold Samuel?" The evening progressed with easy conversation and generous food. Besides the Dixons and Bentleys, the gathering included the town doctor and his wife, the minister and his sister, and two elderly sisters who owned the millinery shop. Throughout dinner, Nathaniel found herself repeatedly drawn into conversation with Jackson. He spoke of books they had both read, asking her opinion with genuine interest. He told stories of early days in the territory that had the table laughing, his usual reserve melting in the warmth of friendship. "You two seem well acquainted," the minister's sister, Miss Harriet Porter, observed during a lull in the general conversation. Her tone carried a hint of speculation that brought heat to Nathaniel's cheeks. "Mr. Bentley saved my life," Nathaniel said simply, "and Samuel's, we owe him everything." Jackson shook his head. "You give me too much credit. Anyone would have done the same." "But not everyone did," Nathaniel replied, meeting his eyes. "It was you who found us." A moment of silence followed, charged with something neither could name. Mary, ever the gracious hostess, skillfully redirected the conversation to safer topics. After dinner, while the others gathered around the piano for carols, Jackson approached Nathaniel, who stood by the window watching snow begin to fall. "I have something for Samuel," he said quietly, reaching into his pocket, "and for you, if you'll accept it." From his pocket he produced a small wooden horse, exquisitely carved with flowing mane and tail. "For when he's older," Jackson explained. "Daniel had one similar as a boy." Nathaniel accepted the gift, turning it over to admire the craftsmanship. "Did you make this?" Jackson nodded, a hint of self-consciousness in his expression. "Winter evenings get long, carving passes the time. It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "Thank you." He hesitated, then produced a second, smaller item wrapped in tissue paper. "This is, well, it's not much." Inside the paper lay a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a book, its cover etched with tiny flowers. "Jackson," she breathed, using his given name without thinking. "It's lovely." "I noticed you always have a book nearby," he said. "Thought it fitting." The thoughtfulness of the gift, that he had observed her habits closely enough to know her love of reading, touched Nathaniel deeply. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," he assured her. "Just, Merry Christmas, Nathaniel." The use of her name, spoken with such warmth, created a flutter in her chest she hadn't felt since Thomas's death. Guilt followed immediately. How could she feel anything like attraction when her husband had been dead less than 6 months? Before she could respond, Mary called everyone to the piano for the final carol. The moment passed, but throughout the remainder of the evening, Nathaniel found herself acutely aware of Jackson's presence across the room. As the gathering ended and guests prepared to depart, heavy snow had blanketed the town in white silence. "You can't ride back to the ranch in this," James told Jackson firmly. "The hotel has rooms. Daniel can stay with us, we've plenty of space. Jackson glanced at the swirling snow outside and nodded. Sensible, thank you, James. He turned to Nathaniel, who was bundling Samuel against the cold. May I walk you home? The streets will be slippery. The schoolhouse lay only 3 blocks away, but Nathaniel welcomed the offer. They stepped into the snowy night, Jackson carrying Samuel while Nathaniel held his arm for stability on the slick walkways. Did you enjoy the evening? He asked as they walked slowly through the transformed town. Very much, Nathaniel admitted, though it's bittersweet. Last Christmas, Thomas and I, her voice trailed off. The first holiday after losing someone is the hardest, Jackson said gently. Catherine died in spring. By Christmas, I thought I'd adjusted, but the empty chair at the table nearly broke me. How did you bear it? Nathaniel asked, grateful for his understanding, one day at a time, for Daniel's sake at first, then eventually for my own. Jackson shifted Samuel in his arms as the baby slept peacefully against his shoulder. Grief doesn't end, but it changes. Becomes something you can carry without being crushed by it. They reached the schoolhouse, the small attached residence dark but welcoming. Jackson waited while Nathaniel unlocked the door and lit a lamp inside. The warm glow spilled onto the snow, creating a picture of domestic tranquility that stirred something deep within both of them. Thank you for the gifts, Nathaniel said as he handed Samuel to her, and for the escort home. Jackson stood awkwardly in the doorway, snow gathering on his hat brim. I should go. Jackson, Nathaniel said impulsively, would you like to come to dinner next week? Nothing fancy, but I make a decent beef stew. Surprise registered on his face, followed by pleasure. I'd like that very much. Daniel too, of course, she confirmed. Tuesday after school. He nodded, seemingly unable to find words for a moment. Then, with a tip of his hat, he stepped back into the snow. Tuesday, he affirmed. Good night, Nathaniel. As she closed the door, Nathaniel acknowledged the warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire she would soon build. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something like hope for the future. Spring came to Silver Peak in a rush of wildflowers and new beginnings. The school term would end in May, but the town council had already renewed Nathaniel's contract for the following year with an increase in salary. Samuel, now 18 months old, had grown into a sturdy toddler whose first steps and words delighted not only his mother but the entire community who had embraced them. The dinner invitation extended that snowy night had become a regular occurrence. Every Tuesday, Jackson and Daniel joined Nathaniel and Samuel for a simple meal and conversation that stretched increasingly later into the evening. Sometimes they discussed books or territorial politics. Other times, they shared memories of their pasts or hopes for their children's futures. As spring advanced, these visits expanded to include Sunday picnics by Silver Creek when weather permitted. Daniel taught Samuel to throw pebbles into the water while Jackson and Nathaniel walked along the bank, their conversations deepening with each meeting. I never expected to find friendship again, Jackson admitted during one such walk. After Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. I felt the same after Thomas, Nathaniel replied, as if grief would be my only companion forever. Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her. The afternoon sunlight caught the gold flecks in his blue eyes. Is friendship all this is, Nathaniel? The directness of his question took her breath away. Honesty demanded an equally direct answer. No, she said softly, I don't think it is. Relief washed over his features. I've been afraid to speak, to presume your loss is still recent. 10 months, Nathaniel said. Sometimes it feels like years, other times like yesterday. She gazed across the creek to where Daniel supervised Samuel's tottering explorations. But Thomas would not have wanted Samuel and me to live in perpetual mourning. He was too full of life himself. Jackson nodded, understanding in his eyes. Catherine told me before she died that I should find happiness again. I didn't believe it was possible until... He hesitated, then took her hand gently in his. Until I found you in the desert, the touch of his calloused fingers against her sent warmth spiraling through Nathaniel's body. Where do we go from here? She asked, slowly. Jackson replied, squeezing her hand, one step at a time. That evening, as Jackson and Daniel prepared to leave, Jackson lingered on the schoolhouse porch. In the privacy of the gathering darkness, he brushed his lips against Nathaniel's cheek, a gesture so gentle it might have been the touch of a butterfly's wing. "Good night, Nathaniel," he whispered. She watched them ride away, her hand pressed to her cheek, conflicting emotions of joy and uncertainty warring within her heart. The town of Silver Peak noticed the developing relationship between their schoolteacher and the respected rancher. Some, like Mary Dixon, observed with approval. Others, particularly mothers with unmarried daughters, viewed the situation with less enthusiasm. "It's too soon," Nathaniel overheard Mrs. Whitmore telling another woman outside the church one Sunday. Her husband barely cold in his grave, and she's setting her cap for Bentley's fortune. The cruel words stung, though they reflected concerns Nathaniel herself had wrestled with. Was she dishonoring Thomas's memory? Would people think she had married him only to abandon his memory at the first opportunity? She confided these fears to Mary during their weekly tea. "Nonsense," Mary declared firmly. "You loved Thomas wholly and truly. Anyone with eyes could see that, but life continues for those left behind, and Thomas would want you to find happiness." "But what will people think?" Nathaniel pressed, her tea growing cold in her cup. "People will always talk," Mary said with the wisdom of long experience. "The question is whether you'll live your life for their approval or for what you know to be right." Nathaniel pondered this advice during the quiet evening hours after Samuel had been put to bed. She took out the locket containing Thomas's likeness, the only image of him that survived the attack. His kind eyes and gentle smile looked back at her. "What would you have me do?" she whispered to the empty room. No answer came, of course. But in her heart, Nathaniel knew Thomas, who had loved life so completely, who had wanted only her happiness, would not begrudge her finding companionship again. On a bright June morning, Jackson arrived unexpectedly at the schoolhouse. Classes had ended for the summer, but Nathaniel was preparing materials for the fall term while Samuel played with wooden blocks on the floor. "Jackson," she greeted him, surprised and pleased. "I wasn't expecting you until Sunday." His expression was grave. "The marshal rode out to the ranch this morning. They've caught them, Nathaniel, the Holloway gang, all 5 of them captured near Carson City." Nathaniel sank into her chair, emotions crashing through her like storm waves. "All of them," Jackson nodded, crossing to kneel beside her chair. "Marshal Evans wants you to identify them. They'll stand trial next week in Carson City." The prospect of facing her husband's killers sent cold fear through Nathaniel's veins. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't look at them again." "You don't have to," Jackson assured her. "But Evans thinks your testimony would ensure they hang. Without it, they might escape the full punishment." Nathaniel closed her eyes, remembering Thomas's final moments, his desperate shout for her to run, the gunshot that silenced him forever. She thought of other travelers who might face the same fate if these men went free. "I'll go," she decided, opening her eyes to meet Jackson's concerned gaze. "But not alone. You won't be," he promised, taking her hand. "I'll be with you every moment." The journey to Carson City took 2 days by stagecoach. Mary agreed to care for Samuel, insisting the ordeal would be difficult enough without worrying about a toddler. Jackson arranged for 2 of his most trusted ranch hands to accompany them as additional protection. Carson City's courthouse loomed imposingly over the main square, its granite steps worn by the passage of countless seekers of justice and mercy. Nathaniel gripped Jackson's arm as they ascended those steps, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Marshal Evans met them in the corridor, his expression both sympathetic and determined. "Mrs. Drake, thank you for coming. The prisoners are being held separately. You'll view them one at a time through a window. They won't see you." The procedure passed in a blur of terror and resolve. One by one, 5 men were brought into a small room, unaware of being observed. One by one, Nathaniel identified them, the leader with his scarred chin, the man missing 2 fingers, the others whose faces had haunted her nightmares for months. "That's them," she confirmed to the territorial judge afterward, her voice steadier than she felt. "Those are the men who murdered my husband. Her testimony, combined with evidence from other attacks linked to the gang, sealed their fate. The judge sentenced all 5 to hang within the month. As they left the courthouse, Jackson kept his arm protectively around Nathaniel's shoulders. "It's over," he said gently. "They can't hurt anyone else now." Relief washed through her, but also an unexpected sadness. The quest for justice had been a tether to Thomas in some way. With it concluded, she felt adrift, freed to move forward but uncertain of her direction. They stayed overnight in Carson City's finest hotel, separate rooms connected by a shared sitting room. After dinner in the hotel restaurant, they sat together in that private space, the events of the day hanging heavy between them. "I feel as though I've closed a door," Nathaniel admitted, gazing into the small fire that warded off the evening chill. "Thomas is truly gone now." Jackson watched her face in the firelight, understanding in his eyes. "Endings make room for beginnings," he said quietly. She looked at him then, really looked at the man who had become so central to her life in less than a year. The strength in his features, the kindness in his eyes, the way he treated her son as precious, all of it spoke to a character Thomas himself would have respected. "Jackson," she began, uncertain how to express the tumult of feelings within her. He saved her from fumbling words by taking her hand gently between both of his. "I have something to ask you, Nathaniel, something I've wanted to ask for months but thought it too soon." Her heart quickened as he continued. "I lost someone I loved, as did you. I know the emptiness of a half-filled house, the silence where there should be conversation, the cold space beside me at night." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I never thought to find someone who could understand that loss, who could help me remember joy again." Jackson slid from his chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Nathaniel Drake, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your devotion to your son. I love the way you've brought light back into Daniel's life and mine. Would you consider becoming my wife? Allowing me to be a father to Samuel, as you've become a mother to Daniel in so many ways." Tears filled Nathaniel's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Jackson, I would be honored to be your wife." His face transformed with happiness as he rose, drawing her up with him. Tentatively, as if she might break, he lowered his lips to hers in their first true kiss, gentle at first, then deepening with shared passion and promise. When they parted, breathless and smiling, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he murmured, "my desert miracle." "And I never expected to need rescuing," she replied, "but I'm thankful every day that you were there to provide it." They returned to Silver Peak the following day, the shared secret of their engagement adding sweetness to the journey. Before announcing it publicly, however, they agreed to tell Daniel and explain to Samuel as best they could. Daniel's reaction surpassed all expectations. The usually serious boy whooped with joy, lifting Samuel high in the air and spinning him around. "We're going to be brothers," he told the confused toddler who giggled at the excitement without understanding its cause. "You're really going to be my new mother?" Daniel asked Nathaniel, hope shining in his eyes. "And we'll all live together at the ranch, if that's all right with you," Nathaniel replied, touched by his enthusiasm. Daniel threw his arms around her waist, burying his face against her shoulder in a rare display of emotion. "I've been hoping Pa would marry you," he admitted, his voice muffled. "Since Christmas," Jackson laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Smarter than your old man, apparently. Took me until spring to work up the courage to even hold her hand." The wedding took place in September, when the aspen trees turned gold against the Nevada sky. The entire town of Silver Peak attended, filling the small church to capacity and spilling onto the lawn outside. Mary Dixon had organized a reception in the town square, with tables laden with food and a platform cleared for dancing. Nathaniel wore a dress of pale blue silk ordered specially from San Francisco, with Samuel's locket pinned close to her heart, keeping Thomas near even as she began a new chapter. Jackson and Daniel matched in new suits, their faces shining with happiness as they stood beside her at the altar. The minister spoke of new beginnings and second chances, of love that grows from shared understanding and mutual respect. When Jackson slipped a gold band onto Nathaniel's finger, his hands trembled slightly, the only outward sign of the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "I, Jackson, take you, Nathaniel, to be my wife," he vowed, his deep voice carrying clearly through the church. "To love and cherish, to honor and protect from this day forward for all the days of our lives." Nathaniel repeated similar words, her voice steady and sure. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson leaned down to kiss his bride with tender reverence that brought tears to many eyes in the congregation. The celebration lasted well into the night. Jackson and Nathaniel danced beneath lantern light, her head resting against his chest, his arms holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible again," she replied truthfully. As the evening concluded, they prepared to leave for the Double B Ranch, their home now, all of them together. Daniel carried a sleeping Samuel to the waiting wagon, carefully tucking blankets around the toddler who would now officially be his brother. Mary Dixon embraced Nathaniel tightly. "Thomas would be pleased," she whispered, "to know you and Samuel are loved and protected." "I think so too," Nathaniel agreed, surprised to find the thought brought comfort rather than pain. The ranch house welcomed them with lit lamps, and a freshly swept hearth. Jackson's foreman's wife had prepared everything for their arrival. As Jackson carried Nathaniel over the threshold, she felt the rightness of this place, this moment, this man. Later, in the privacy of what was now their bedroom, Jackson held her close beneath soft quilts. "I never thought to find happiness again," he confessed. "After Catherine died, I believed that part of my life was over." "As did I after Thomas," Nathaniel replied, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "We were both wrong." "Thankfully so," Jackson agreed, capturing her hand to press a kiss to her palm. "I love you, Nathaniel Bentley." The new name sounded right in her ears. "And I love you, Jackson Bentley, with all my heart." In the years that followed, the Bentley family flourished. The Double B Ranch prospered under Jackson's careful management, while Nathaniel continued teaching, eventually opening a secondary school in Silver Peak for older students seeking advanced education. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed Daniel everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could properly walk. Daniel, under Nathaniel's guidance, developed his academic talents alongside his ranching skills, eventually attending university in San Francisco before returning to help manage the expanding family enterprises. 2 years after their wedding, Nathaniel gave birth to twin girls Catherine and Thomasina, named for those they had loved and lost. Jackson wept unashamedly when he first held his daughters, overwhelmed by the fullness of his reclaimed life. As the children grew, so too did the legend of how their family began, the story of a brave young widow and her baby rescued from certain death by a lonesome rancher who found his heart again in the process. It became a tale told around campfires and hearths throughout the territory, a reminder that even in the harshest wilderness, hope and love could bloom from tragedy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Nathaniel with a small carved wooden box. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a silver pen. "For your stories," he explained as she examined the beautiful gift. "The ones you tell the children about courage and second chances, they should be written down, preserved for future generations." Nathaniel smiled, touching the journal's soft cover. "Our story, you mean? The best one I know," Jackson agreed, wrapping his arms around her waist as they stood on the porch watching their children play in the summer twilight. Samuel, now 11, helped 5-year-old Thomasina mount her pony while Daniel steadied Catherine on hers. Their laughter carried across the ranch yard on the evening breeze. "If anyone had told me that day in the desert where this path would lead," Nathaniel mused, leaning back against her husband's solid chest, "I wouldn't have believed them." Jackson pressed a kiss to her temple. "The best journeys are the unexpected ones." "With the right companion," she added, turning in his arms to face him, his blue eyes, crinkled now with smile lines earned through years of happiness, gazed down at her with unchanged devotion. Always, my love, always. As the sun set over the Nevada mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Nathaniel offered silent thanks for the tragedy that had nearly broken her, the courage that had carried her forward, and the love that had ultimately saved them both.